Welcome to the latest episode of Branding the Experience, where we discuss ways where we can create environments where employees actually want to come to work and customers want to keep coming back. Hi, I'm Ken Bader, your host for Branding the Experience, also the founder of Bader Training and Consulting, and the author of the book, The Formula for Business Success Equals B plus C plus S. But I want to talk about another book today, written by another great author, Eddie Lucerian, called When Bosses Go Wild. Just had an opportunity to read it, and it's a great basic book to use, especially for training. The one thing that I really like, and there's a lot of things to like about this book because it's easy to read, it flows very nicely, it's a pretty compact book, so you can use it as a foundation for training between employees and managers. But the number one thing that I like about this book is it talks about the commitment. And at the end of each chapter, he does this in rounds of 12. At the end of each chapter, he has a space for the employee's commitment and the manager's commitment. And I love that because a lot of times we talk about the responsibilities of the boss, of the person in charge, and what he needs to do or what she needs to be doing. And certainly that's the case. If we're in management, we have a much higher responsibility to brand the experience for our employees so that they can brand the experience for our customers, members, clients, whoever we call them. Certainly that's a higher responsibility. But there's a responsibility on the employees as well. That as somebody working for a manager, that we need to understand how can we better build an experience with our supervisor? How can we do a better job of making that connection? Because it's not a one-way street. And one of the things that, if you've read any of my articles, read the book, seen some of these other videos or my podcasts, one of my mantras is that we can't have an us versus them mentality. And part of that is, as an employee, we can't adopt that mentality. We have to remember that this person that we're reporting to is just another human being, just another individual that's going to make mistakes, that's going to do things the wrong way sometimes. So how can I help this situation as an employee? So that's one of the things I really liked about this. The one caution that I'll say is Eddie talks about, and these are my words, not Eddie's. He talks about you making sure that you stand up for yourself, and that if something does go wrong, that it's your responsibility to confront the manager. And certainly there are times where we do need to speak up. But one, there are ways to speak up. Closing the door or cornering our manager and being hostile probably is not going to get us to where we want to go. But having a civil conversation about something you felt uncomfortable with, certainly is a good thing. And also remember that he talks about the situation where the leader is taking credit for somebody else's work. Well, it depends on how he or she does that. If he or she blatantly says that he did the work or she did the work, then maybe there does need to be a conversation. But if you did 95% of the work and your boss says, well, the team did a great job on putting this together, and doesn't necessarily mention you by name as the person that did the work, well, it's a team effort. As long as that individual isn't taking all of the credit, if he's not mentioning anybody by name, but basically taking the credit for the whole department, I don't have a real problem with that. I think that there needs to be a team dynamic. So that's the one thing that I caution from this particular book. But being cognizant of when we are going to talk to our manager that is another human being, and how can we do it not in a confrontational way, but do it in a respectful way where we get our point across, of course, but we leave that individual with his or her respect, and also don't create an issue where we create animosity with our manager. At the end of the day, we all have to work together. But I would really recommend this book as a starter for maybe some initial employee engagement training. I think that it's in a workbook style, so there are things that you can work through together. I also like the fact that it's a pretty easy read. It's not a lot of small type, so a nice little training book there. And I'll close with this in terms of when bosses go wild. You know, sometimes we do go wild. Sometimes we do stupid things, and not necessarily on purpose. So I'll share a story from my background where where I was a boss and probably did something wild and stupid. We always used to have a marketing team management meeting. This was for an organization I worked for a number of years ago. And being a dominant style on the disc profile, you know, a lot of times, you know, I want to get to the point, and I also don't want to waste everybody's time unnecessarily. But unfortunately, people of different styles. In this particular example, I had a lady who's very, very skilled, who is more of a conscientious style. You know, somebody that is going to not only move a little bit more methodical than I would, but also will need a little bit more information and take a little bit more time for discussion. So I found myself saying, well, you know, in group meetings to this individual, basically, in essence, we've already spoken about this long enough. We've already talked about this long enough. And you know, finally, you know, the one good thing that I did in this situation is, I think after a few meetings, you know, I saw that she kind of got up and at the end of the meeting and was, you know, partially hurt and partially disgusted. And fortunately, you know, while I went wild with that particular rather stupid behavior on my part, but came to my senses and literally stopped everybody before we walked out of the room. And I said, you know, excuse me, and we'll use another name, Julie. You know, Julie, hold on one second, and made sure that everybody else was still in the room. And I said, does it bother you when I say that? When I say that, you know, we've already talked about this enough? And she got very adamant and said, yes, it bothers me a lot. It seems dismissive, like it's not important to you or anybody else, and what I have to say I feel is important. And I said, you know what, you're exactly right. You know, I apologize. I never want you to feel dismissed or that you haven't been able to get your point across, because nobody on this team should feel that way. And despite my stupidity in doing it beforehand, I held true to my promise. I made sure that I never said, we've already talked about this long enough. You know, so, you know, and this is one of the things that Eddie talks about in his book, is basically the manager's commitment in being cognizant of what we're saying, being cognizant of what we're doing. You know, we need to make sure that, you know, while we're still human beings, you know, we need to understand what effect our actions and our words have, because they're going to play a role either in a negative or hopefully a positive way in branding the experience. So thank you for taking some time with me today. I encourage you to take a look at Eddie's book, When Bosses Go Wild, which I believe you can find on Amazon.com. And here's hoping that your experience at your business is branded at a very high level. Thank you, and take care.